So I'm using the wax to check the piston to cylinder head clearances, especially on the sides of the combustion chamber, where the piston was earlier touching gently the cylinder head. Cylinder 2, what I'm going to do, I'm actually also going to check, just out of curiosity. I know that the valve pockets are in the right place, but I'll see how it looks like with the So this is very interesting to see how much there is actually between the piston dome and the cylinder head. I'm using this pick. So as the shape is like this, of course I will eventually be able to see from the size of this little hole that I make with it how close we are. And here I can tell you that even though we took a little off from this point in here, it's still very close. So I might actually, just to be on the safe side, still very gently take a little off from here, because the cams are just so crazy and I need so deep valve pockets that to get the compression ratio up, there's no other choice but fill in the combustion chamber from the edges and here and go as close to the spark plug in the middle as possible. And now it's very nice. So I measured with the spark plug that I've been using now. I will have on the TDC 1 millimeter from the side electrode to the piston. So there's not much between the spark plug and the center of the piston dome. And you see the piston comes all the way here and uses fills in all these areas around here also. Yeah, so the dome design is getting very close. Let's say for the next piston I can make very small adjustments on the design, but it's getting really good. Trying to show you where all the magic happens, and which is one of the most important things in the engine, to make power on so high RPM. And generally in a naturally aspirated engine, the cylinder head is so important. And here, with this old cylinder head design from the early 80s, it's amazing what you can do with this. But it all lies in here. The little details on the port shapes, the how the port comes into the valve seat, and so on. Of course, the size of the valve and the size of the port, and these things matter. But then the shape, to really use the whole area of the valve as effectively as you can on the small lift and on the high lift. That's really important. And this is where really Kansiviritus has a lot of experience on the cylinder heads. I trust him. He's the or Jari is the guy in Finland who does my cylinder heads, and these are really good. It's not just the intake port. The exhaust port is as important as the intake, and to really make the whole scavenging work well, the ports have to work together. And this is also one thing here with the dome design. When you start getting and using so much, filling the combustion chamber, that's affecting naturally what happens in the TDC and during the valve overlap. So these things have to, there's a balance with some of these things and trade-offs. So you have to find what is really the most important factor. Yeah, this engine has a really nice sound, and I think it could be really this exhaust port which is the key on the sound. Of course, the exhaust manifold, the whole exhaust system, and so on. But anyway, what happens when the exhaust valve opens? That's, I think, the where the most for the note comes from. When it happens, how it happens, and what happens when the valve opens. So one more thing to note on the cylinder head. Usually when you have these heads on the flow bench, you will hear a lot of, let's say the sound is not as smooth and nice when you have problems on the ports, but this head sounds also really good on the flow bench. So you know there's really no problems on the flow in any lift on the intake or on the exhaust side. I really like the challenge on these small naturally aspirated engines, especially these older designs that are not so easy. It's really satisfying to make good power. I'm always looking into the horsepower per liter, what you can reach, and even though I built some turbo engines over the years, even small displacement 2.2 liter 5 cylinders Audi engines over 1000 horsepower, I never really get the same satisfaction as from this little thing here. Revving up to 11,000 RPM, making peak power at 10,500, and we're on the territory over 155 horsepower per liter, which is really good for a home build little NA screamer. So yeah, I'm one of those guys who don't like the modern Formula 1. I definitely like more the old good old times with the screaming engines. It's the sound. Something I want to show. Intake valve number 1. You see on the side of the valve, on the outer edge, there's marks. It's actually valve number 1 and valve number 3 has been touching gently the piston. I didn't notice this when I tore down the engine, but now since the valves are cleaned, you can see that the 1 and 3 has touched slightly, and looking at the piston, it confirms this. So it means that the timing I had was pretty much on the edge of the intake was as early as possible, as advanced as it could have been. It was very close. So I'm using an oil restrictor on the oil channel to the cylinder head. A few things to consider when you're planning to use something like this. There is already a restriction on the cylinder head, so the oil actually comes through the first cylinder head bolt bore in, and there's a little line that goes into the front. There's few bores here to feed both of the camshafts. So there is already a really small diameter hole in here. So there's going to be a pressure drop based on the size of the orifice in here, and then there's another pressure drop in here. So you kind of have to think about it a little bit. You just can't put something in here. So what I'm doing now, I'm actually changing a little bit the size of my restrictor, and the next time, I didn't do it now, but I would actually maybe like to change the oil feed to be external. Then I could find easier, because now I can change it only when I'm having the cylinder head off, and then I can screw the restrictor here. But it would be easier to feed externally, and then you could put restrictors and try and measure the oil pressure in the cylinder head. So the water goes in from here through the block, mostly up from the back to the cylinder head, through the cylinder head and out from here. Of course there's a little bit of holes in here that the air gets out, and there's a little bit of a flow also directly up from these little holes here, but mostly it will just go through the block up from the back of the engine and then to the front. Yeah, so in the original 4AGE engine with the heater, there's also a takeoff for the heater from the back of the cylinder head. Then it goes through the heater core and comes back into the front. So there's oil and ARP molu mixed both on these cylinder head stud washers, so I want to clean them and put just the ARP molu on them.